All right, good evening and welcome to the June edition of the Astroimaging Special Interest Group. If we have any folks who this may be your first time on the meeting with us, and you feel free to introduce yourself. Any new folks? Any old timers that want to introduce yourselves? Okay. Also, we usually reserve the first few minutes of our monthly get-together for beginners' questions. So if you have some question that you think is a newbie type of question, maybe if it isn't, that's okay too, but feel free to speak up and ask your question at this point. No beginners.
Too many clouds lately. Nobody's been outside.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Yes. One thing I'd like to understand is I'm pretty new to imaging. I have some good equipment, but I do not have an imaging processing software other than what I have on my Apple iPhone. Who would you recommend me get for the next step? I would presume it would be Insight, PixInsight. Is that correct?
Well, you're talking about for processing?
Hello?
Yeah. You're looking for processing software? Can you hear us?
I can now.
Okay, you can. So I was asking, you're looking for processing software.
Yes.
So there are a number of good options. I don't think there's any single path that is optimal to follow. I think you have to figure out what your needs and wants are, budget constraints. Certainly there are a lot of PixInsight users here. We've also got folks using AstroPixel processor, and some use older programs, including a lot of Photoshop. So I think it's a more complex answer than just what's the next thing to use after an iPhone.
So if I was, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're getting feedback.
Martin, you look like you're logged in twice. I see two Martin Hale and M Hale.
Oh.
So we're probably getting feedback from one of them.
Okay, I'll sign out and come back in.
And then the one you have that's just Martin Hale is muted. So if you're talking to us, we're not hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, and without feedback. Good.
Excellent, very good. Well, thank you. Yes, so I've, from what I understand, PixInsight is the best imaging program to start out with after you have as a start, where you want to be able to combine subs and such.
I think there are people who might argue the point. It is. I think it's been considered the Lexus of the field. It is designed by imaging scientists, but there's a lot of good stuff on the market now. including some which is free.
Cyril's free. It's got a lot of tools that have been added into it, but the I think for any of the tool sets, the the thing you'll need to wrap your head around first is what is it that I'm really trying to do? No matter which tool set it is, it's if you're coming into it without any experience, there's a fair amount to learn. So there's a lot of videos out there to watch. You know, you might start with trying to find videos that are, kind of like beginner processing through. And if you want to try something that's free, again, Cyril's free. It has some good tools in it. It's got some of the things we use in PixInsight now, like general hyperbolic stretch, which is a great image stretching tool. It's got some really nice denoising tools. So these are the kind of things you'll get into, but they're all a little bit difficult. I'd say PixInsight feels more difficult immediately because it's got a menu structure that's got, you drop down a menu item and there's 50 items under it. So you go, oh my God, what'd I get into? And you end up finding out that there's a lot of that stuff you just don't use, or you use much later once you've become very experienced. So there's some, probably 10 core processing steps you would use in PixInsight that are easy to identify. And there's got to be a video out there that's like probably Quiv is done on, here's a way to walk through general processing of images. So it's kind of like pick one. PixInsight, like Jeff was saying, is the gold standard. I think you'll eventually end up there, but sometimes it's easier to start with something that doesn't feel so overwhelming, is maybe the right word.
Another thing a newcomer to take a look at is the SETI Astro Suite by Frank Merrick. And I know there's at least one member who
Yeah.
uses it regularly and is a real booster of it. And Merrick is very smart, very creative. One advantage of PixInsight is because it's widely used, there's tons of material online about it, whether it's YouTube or other articles. You probably find a little bit less content on some of the other products, but like Craig says, there's plenty of ways to learn online, whichever of these you pick.
Okay, thank you. Now, Cyril, how do you spell that?
Siril.
Okay, thank you. That might be a better, that might be the best because there's nothing to pay for, and it will get me started into
And the
astronomy.
one Jeff just mentioned, SETI Astro's free too.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. City
Yeah.
Astro Suite. Okay, very good. Okay, I'll try that one. Great. Thank you for your perspective and advice.
Welcome.
All right. Any other beginner questions? Okay, not hearing any. I'm going to turn things over to our guest speaker and let him take it away.
Please enable sharing if you would.
It's not enabled.
Nope. In fact, it says you have disabled it.
Oh, I thought I had enabled it. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that.
There we go. All right. Everybody seeing my cover page here?
Yes.
All right. So good evening, everyone, and welcome. You may remember that about 18 months ago, 4 of us did an overview of Nina. the entire architecture. The advanced sequencer we touched on at the end. Tonight, the goal is to dive into the advanced sequencer and take a close look at what it does, what it can do. The advanced sequencer really is the reason for Nina's existence. It's where all the other tools are brought together to create a plan for imaging for a night. It's a step-by-step drag and drop interface, as you will see. And I've highlighted in gold here, when you click the sequencing button on the left-hand menu of Nina, you will see these options. Here's the advanced sequencer. It doesn't say so, but target set is what used to be called the simple or legacy sequencer. And just a word about that. There's a tendency to say, well, I'm new to Nina. I'll start with the simple sequencer. I'll use that for a while. Then I'll work my way up to the advanced sequencer. The simple sequencer is the advanced sequencer architecturally, with an overlay that strips out about 99% of the features of the advanced sequencer to give you a very basic set of options that you can use to create an image set. We can talk about it in the questions. I am an advocate for learning how to build a very simple advanced sequence so that you're learning the techniques from the beginning rather than starting with the simple sequencer and graduating later to the advanced sequencer and having to learn the interface all over again. I'm going to go through just a couple slides and then we'll start looking at sequences. Now, a program, as we all know from the industry jargon, is a solution or an answer. If the advanced sequencer is the answer or the solution, I think we have to ask, well, what is the question? What is the advanced sequencer aiming to do? And I submit that the question is, what must happen step by step through the entire night for my rig at my location to be ready to image my targets the way I want, and then to shut down cleanly at the end of the night. And I really call your attention to the 3 bullet points here because you are going to see them visually in the advanced sequencer when we get to it. Now, to begin, so we're going to spend most of the evening talking about a version of my current advanced sequence, which I have developed it over, I went back and looked. I started building advanced sequences 4.5 years ago. I started very simple, copying templates from Patriot Astro, which I highly commend to you if you're a beginner with Nina. And then I would add things. I'd say, oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do this. And one at a time, I would add a new command to do whatever the additional thing was. And the sequence accumulates those commands. And I would test things. And once I had them tested, I stopped. I don't change them because I'm likely to screw them up if I start making too many changes. So in 4.5 years, what I've created, I would describe as my pre-flight checklist because it contains a lot of optionality for what I want to do in the course of a night. I don't have to go out and find a sequence for show imaging or a sequence for LRGB. They're all in my sequence. I just turn on and off the ones that I want. And I would submit that the on-off button in the advanced sequence is your friend. Now, tonight, what you're going to see is actually not my exact current sequence because I make extensive use of a plugin called Sequencer Power-Ups. Sequencer Power-Ups allow you to use greater degrees of logic, variables, and constants than you can get in the ordinary advanced sequencer. Now, Nina is currently in version 3.2. Version 3.3 is under development. It's in fairly early, nightly, unstable, they say, stage. And the sequencer power-ups are being incorporated directly into version 3.3 of Nina. Now, 3.3 won't be released till probably 2027. So what we're going to talk about next month is my sequence where we can go into detail on the power-ups. But tonight, what I've done is I've taken my sequence, I've removed almost all the power-ups and created a sequence that does essentially the same thing, but without any of the power-ups. And then next month, we'll put them side by side, and I'll show you the advantages, what I think the advantages are of using power-ups. So to understand my sequence, you got to understand my rig. Here's my rig. Refractor, filter wheel, CW camera, guide scope, comms and power switch up here. Two things you can't see here are the autofocuser because it's on the other side of the telescope. And I have now replaced this lens cap with a Deep Sky Dad flat panel so that it's my cover, but it's also a flat panel so that I can automate my flats at any point in the evening. Astrophysics mount. A couple of things that you will see in my sequence are astrophysics related. And we'll talk about that. The other thing that I would highlight for you is the fact that the mount is sitting approximately 10 feet from the wall of my house. We are looking west as this picture is taken. You can see the Catalinas there in the reflection in the window. This means that my western sky is obstructed below 45, even 50 degrees in some places. So that means generally I image 2 objects a night. I can't go all night long on one. So now I'm just going to flip over. Now we're going to get into the sequences, and I want to start here. This is the sequencer page. This is what you get when you click the sequencer button right here. And I'm showing you here the fundamental architecture of an advanced sequence. It's a hamburger. You have the top bun, which is your startup commands. The meat of the evening is imaging here. And the bottom bun is what happens when you're done with your imaging and it's time to end the sequence. Now, over on the left here are the main menu buttons for the other features of Nina. On the right we're currently looking at all the instructions that you can drag and drop, and you just grab one, you drag it. Oh, that doesn't work. You got to be in a sequence to drag something in here. You can drag in a command, drop it just like that wherever you want it. But let's take a look at what a simple sequence would look like. And then once we've done that, then we'll go back and dive into mine. So for startup, I also another item of vocabulary. You'll see this little box icon. This means instruction set, or I think in more common parlance in the Nina world, a container. It's simply a group of instructions or other containers. Note, you open this container, you get 2 subcontainers. Well, when you start up a sequence, what do? Well, you check out your equipment and you do it autofocus in a safe place and sync the sky, the mount with the sky. So let's look at equipment check. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to wait till dusk or whatever time we want. We're going to cool the camera. and we can set whatever temperature we want. It's summertime. On my camera, when it's 98 degrees outside, will not go to -10, so I use 0 in the summer. We're going to unpark the scope. We're going to set tracking to sidereal, unless you're doing something funky. And then we're going to go on to choose a filter for autofocusing. We're going to slew the telescope someplace. In my case, I slew it to the east over the mountains, away from trees, away from the wall of my house. We run autofocus, and then we solve and sync so that the telescope knows where it's pointing. That's startup. Basic startup. Okay, I've got the wrong thing here. I apologize. Oh, I know what I did. I'm going to fix this very quickly. Okay. Sorry about that. And we're going to take out these annotations. So we've got the telescope focused. So what do we do next? We're going to slew and center, maybe rotate. We're going to autofocus if time has elapsed, and we're going to start guiding. I want to highlight a couple of things here because we're going to see this again. You notice we have within a container, a target container, this is called, this whole box is a target container. You're going to have the name of a target, its coordinates, and the rotation that you saved when you were playing with the target in the framing assistant over here. There are triggers, loop conditions, and instructions. Now, we talked about these in the session a year and a half ago. Very briefly, a trigger says, if an event happens, this is going to, it's going to trigger some command that will happen at the end of the most current instruction. So if you're running a sequence, you'll see here the sequence is we're going to do 20 times 300 second exposures. So if a trigger condition is met at the 183rd second of an exposure, it's not going to interrupt the exposure. It will wait till the exposure has finished at 300 seconds. And then the trigger will be launched and it will do whatever it's going to do. We're going to see some examples of that in a minute. Loop conditions are the, in addition to the linear path of step by step what the sequence is going to do all night, loops allow you to specify a command and put it into a loop. Say, I want you to do 2,300 second exposures. Instead of putting in an exposure command for a single 300 second exposure and then replicating it 20 times, this allows you to loop it, and you can loop based on conditions. Just if you look over here, you can loop for a set number of iterations like we're going to see below. You can loop until the target's for a time span. Do this for 2 hours, as much as you get. Now remember, if you're doing 20 times 300 seconds, it is not going to take you 6,000 seconds to complete this exposure because there's dithering, there's save time, there's additional time being spent besides just the actual exposure time. You can loop until the sun's at a certain altitude, till a certain time. You can loop until astronomical dawn. Lots of options here. And then you have your individual instructions. And an individual instruction, for example, dither after exposures. When you see a bracketed number here, you want to dither after every exposure. just overwrite it with a 1. There's no saving here. Nina automatically saves what you change, which is good because you don't have to worry about hitting the save button, but it's bad because there's no undo button. So here, once we've gotten to the target, what do we want to do? Well, we've got a trigger for a meridian flip, and you set your meridian flip parameters in options. We're not going to go into that tonight. But if the telescope reaches the point where it's inside the window to complete a flip and an exposure ends, it will command the telescope to flip, and then it will resume the sequence after the flip. Notice there are 2 autofocus triggers. So we're going to autofocus after star HFR increases. You have variables here for sample size, for percentage. You can track it by filter if you wish. You can also command an autofilter after a filter change. You can command an autofilter after autofocus after a temperature change of a set amount. You can command an autofocus after time. You can stack up 3, 4 different autofocus commands. When one triggers, they all reset. So you won't have 4 of them hitting, 3 minutes apart. And that's a useful feature. And then the core of the imaging, this is a container again. And I've got some quibbles with how Patriot set this up, but we'll save that too for a beer. Instead of a loop, it's a command for 20 times 300 seconds. He uses a command called smart exposure. And let's just walk through it. Number, 20 exposures. Time, he didn't put that in there, 300 seconds. What kind of frame is it? Is it a light, flat, dark, bias? These are lights. Set your binning, gain, offset. It says camera here. When it is reading off of the ASCOM driver for your camera that you have to install when you're installing Nina. And you will set a default gain and offset. You can vary them here. You want 0? No problem. You want 121? Whatever, just type it in. If you delete it, it will go back to the default. The filter, you can choose the how you do these in red or green or blue, luminance, and how often do you want to dither. So you set these commands once, and this will repeat 20 times. You've now captured 20 5-minute exposures. Instead of an hour and 40 minutes, it probably took you an hour and 50 minutes, and we're done. So we go to the sequence end. What happens at the end? Well, you warm the camera, park your telescope. So that is, these sequences were all created by Patriot Astro when the advanced sequencer was initially released. And what I now want to do is switch over to my sequence, but let me pause here before we dive into the details of my sequence. Any questions on what you've seen so far? Anything else in Nina that you want to see as a quick refresher?
Yeah, Jeff, I have a question. You slew to a place in the sky to do an autofocus run and a sync right at the very beginning there.
Yep.
And I've done that too. I've noticed that when I slew to a altitude and azimuth location, that my ASCOM driver for my astrophysics telescope goes to stop. It doesn't continue in the sidereal mode that I've set. Does something different happen when you use sidereal mode in the sequence?
And you're not using APCC, right?
No.
That's Astrophysics Command Center, their software for controlling their mount, which integrates with Nina, and you'll see that. It sounds like there is something in the ASCOM. The telescope shouldn't stop moving after a slew.
It doesn't stop moving if you slew in right ascension and declination, but if you slew to a alt-azimuth spot, it stops and you have to turn sidereal tracking back on before you can do the autofocus.
And you're turning it back on in Nina?
Uh, no, I'm turning it back on in the driver.
No, maybe you and I can have a call tomorrow and figure that one out.
Okay.
That's
It sounds like it's a switch someplace.
I don't know how to turn it back on. I don't know why you'd have to go to the driver, but it's also a kind of a poor man's park position. If you got a mount that doesn't have a park, you can alt as it to point west, and
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it fixes not having a park position by sending it to a specific location that's always the exact same spot.
It's not a big deal. It's simple to do, but I thought perhaps something was different the way Jeff had implemented it actually in the startup part of the sequence there.
So I do use APCC. I know there are some commands where you could tell APCC under certain circumstances, stop moving the mount. It's a safety feature. I'm not aware of one that would stop it after slewing to a particular alt-az.
Yeah, I noticed in your sequence there, you're slewing to an alt-az, and then apparently it's not stopping it, just letting you go
Yeah,
ahead.
so and I do use this command.
Okay.
I still have it from the days when I was building off of this very container.
And I use that for my scope to always point to a place where I want to do my initial focus, and it doesn't interfere with the mount
Yeah.
like an
I don't think it's a Nina
AM5 or
issue, Greg,
yeah.
Okay.
because I think it'd be a pain in the neck to have to figure out, okay, what RA is over the mountains at the moment, about 70 degrees up, due east.
Right.
You know, for this sort of tool, alt-az is intuitive. Okay, any other questions about the
Jeff, can I ask, you mentioned the plugin is, I'm looking at the list of plugins that are available and I see one that's called Sequencer Plus. Is that the same one that you were talking about?
Sequencer Plus?
Yeah.
Here's Sequencer Plus, the advanced sequencer on steroids. You know, I have not used this. So I am not familiar with it.
Well, then which is the one that you were mentioning?
Sequencer power-ups, which is this from Mark Blank. I wonder if Sequencer Plus, I'd have to look up when this was created, but it looks like it was another attempt to do some of the things that Sequencer power-ups does: constants, variables, and logical expressions, and template by reference. Or perhaps he's building on those and doing something even more cool that I don't know about.
Okay. Well, I
Every
don't
time
see,
I open this list of available plugins, there's something new.
yeah, I'm not seeing Sequencer PowerUp as an option to install, but that's okay. So far, none of the things you've shown, I don't think are from the plugin, correct?
That's right.
Mhm.
But I'm going to write down Sequencer Plus and I'll see what I can learn about it. All right, so what I want to do now is flip over to my sequence. And I'm starting the view just like the other one was with the hamburger bun. Start up an equipment check, imaging, and shutdown. Now there's a couple of things here that are new. We have a global trigger. We talked about triggers already inside of a target. You can put triggers there, but you can also put a trigger way up at the top of the sequence. It will trigger anytime the condition is met. The only one that I've seen fit, the only trigger that I've seen fit to make global is failure notices, because that's kind of target and equipment. It doesn't matter what the equipment is doing. It doesn't matter what target you're looking at. If something has failed and you want a notice of it, and this is using a tool called Ground Station, a plugin, which if I go back to the instructions here, scroll down to Ground Station. Here are all the commands that are available within Ground Station to send failure notices to a whole bunch, to Discord, email, IFTT, pushover, Slack, Telegram, play a sound, send an email, lots of options for communicating what is happening inside the sequence. Now, Martin said earlier he likes to sleep. I'm a big believer in sleep, and I wouldn't be in this hobby if I had to sit up all night with the telescope. So notice I get failure notices, but it's more of a log for me because there's no sound. Once I go to sleep at night, I trust my safety settings to protect the equipment, and I don't want to be awakened. But when I wake up in the morning, I can open my pushover app and it will show me any failure notices that have come in. The other thing that's new here, this is another plugin, Night Summary End. Night Summary is a new plugin that produces a report like this every night. It's a ton of data and analysis of the data that I just thought was really cool. So here's the entire timeline of what happened. This is dead time. This is before imaging began. Here's my first target. Here's my second target. Here's my third target. Overview, images, total exposure time. What's my yield? Total exposure time divided by total time spent. Breakdown of data. Where did my downtime get spent? Autofocus, image save, dithering, etc. Just a wealth of information. What altitude was the first target at during the session? What exposures did I capture? So it just it used to be an Excel or Google Sheets document that you could save by default, but this is just a cool plugin that I thought I'd share with you. But now let's dig into the specifics of my hamburger. So I typically set up my routine in the afternoon, and I want to have you activate the sequence by pressing the run button. Oh, and ignore the warning exclamation points here. All this means is there's no equipment connected to the software at the moment. We're in a demo mode, not live. I do all my planning, set what I want to set or vary for the night, and I press the run button. And then I can go in, feed the dogs, have dinner, relax until the sequence gets underway. So the first thing I tell this telescope to do is wait, because it's 4:30 on a summer afternoon. I don't start anything till the sun is 4 degrees below the horizon, so a little after sunset. First thing I do is connect all the equipment. Now, I could do this manually, but I don't have to. I have this command, wait for time span, because I probably don't need it, but when I first put this in, putting the connect command, I thought I better give it a little bit of lag time in case something hasn't quite finished connecting before this command finishes. But the fact of the matter is, until all the pieces of equipment say to Nina, I'm here, this command is finished. So this isn't necessary. So basically, I get everything connected at 4 degrees below the horizon. Then here's another container. I start night summary. Figure there's no point starting it at 4:30 in the afternoon. There's nothing to record. A message goes to pushover. So this is the first I know when I'm sitting in, I've just finished dinner and the dishes are done. I get a message. This one does have a sound. So my phone chirps at me. System's ready to go. It will, in parallel, notice this is a parallel instruction set. So it is launching all these commands simultaneously. You can also have serial instruction sets if you wish. It sends me the message. It starts cooling the camera to whatever temperature I've set it at. In summertime, like I said, I set it at 0. It will move the focuser to close to where I think the actual focus will be for the night. And when I'm running night after night, I know, okay, well, it's going to be a few degrees warmer than yesterday, so I can adjust this number up or down accordingly. And I open my flat panel cover. Now we wait some more. Now we're going to wait till the sun is 8 degrees below the horizon. Now the stars are out. So unpark the scope, set the tracking to sidereal, and slew to 60 degrees altitude, 80 degrees azimuth. Now, Greg, actually, here's one thing to check. Notice the command tracking on, off. You might make sure this is on. I think it's on by default, but maybe you turned it off. Anyway, so the telescope points out over the mountains from my backyard. I face east. And this is the one sequencer power-up that you're going to see tonight, because there is no longer separate if-then logic in the advanced sequencer. There used to be, but they took it out when the power-ups came along. So what is an if-fails command? It's very simple. The command is run autofocus. The parameter is try it 3 times. If at any point it succeeds, it will go on to the next command. If all 3 of these fail, it will send me a message with a bugle sound that autofocus has failed, and I got to go out and do something about it. It may be that I set this number so far off of where the actual focus is that it can't identify stars. So I've got to, this is going to require some sort of manual intervention. But assuming the autofocus runs as it normally does, I get another message, focusing is now complete. And the entire message tells me the mount is ready for alignment. Align the mount, set rotation, take flats. I generally set up and tear down as infrequently as I reasonably can. In the cooler months, I use telegizmos covers with a patio umbrella shading the telegizmos covers. And I'll, in that condition, I'll leave the scope out as long as it's not going to rain. And that way I align them out once and I can use it for days. This time of year, I have not yet gotten comfortable leaving the mount out when it's 104, even with the covers and the umbrella. So I tear it down in the morning, got to set it up again, which means I have to polar align. I do that manually with the 3-point polar alignment tool that is available in Nina. I used to use SharpCap, but my trees grew in and I no longer have a good view of Polaris. So it sends me this command that some physical interventions are now in order, and then it waits indefinitely. It also pops up a little message, and a message box just means you're going to get a box right in the middle of your screen with the command. And in this case, it says, please enter the initial focus steps in the global variable autofocus start above, which I should have taken out of here because that is a sequencer power-up feature. So never mind. All right, I'm aligned now. I've got my rotation set. I have to do that manually, which again, Nina has a way of doing, but I have to loosen the rotator, shift the camera, tighten the rotator, take a picture, let it measure the rotation until I get the rotation I want. Once that's done, and the flats we're going to see later, now I have a decision to make. Normally, I would create an all-sky model. Now that is an astrophysics tool right over here, create all-sky model. The astrophysics allows you to create two kinds of sky models, which increase the accuracy of the mount's tracking. With my telescope being a wide field scope, and I'm on a tripod and I'm not keeping this indefinitely, I use a small model. I'll take maybe 45 points in the night sky, and I can set it so it's not trying to take points that are behind my house, things like that. That takes about 20 minutes. And the scope just slews around, takes a picture, compares what its settings are to the solved setting of the picture, and makes a note of that difference. And it uses those differentials to improve its tracking. A couple of options here. I can run it in manual mode, which I usually do because I want to choose exactly how many points I'm going to model. I can keep it open or not. I leave it closed. Then when this is done, I tell it to wait indefinitely, which gives me a chance. There's a little white box pops up at the end of the creation of the model. It says, do you want to use this model? And you have to click OK. So I stop the sequence until I've clicked OK. So it waits indefinitely. Once I've clicked OK, I will bypass the wait indefinitely. And when one of these wait indefinitely commands is active, there's a little red stop button here. Personally, I think it should be go. But when you're done waiting, you click the stop button and it goes on to the next command. If I'm lucky and there wasn't a ton of alignment to do and the model was small, it won't be astronomical dusk yet, and I'll tell it to wait till dusk. So that is my startup routine. There is only one point of physical intervention. And if I'm out a second night, so the mount is aligned because I haven't touched it from the night before. The rotation is set because I didn't touch the rotation, and I'm doing automated flats. When it reaches this point, I'll just click over it. So you can, this is an important point. You can interact with the sequence. You can change things on the fly. You just can't change the currently active command. So if you're in a command that's, remember that smart exposure command, if you're in the middle of an exposure and you want to change from 20 images to 30 images, you got to click the stop button. It'll stop, change your setting, and then click start, and it'll resume. But this is a living, breathing thing during the course of the night. Important point to remember. Questions on the startup process? And now we're talking my startup process. All right, so let's go on to the hamburger. In this sequence, I'm using a 6200 camera with a 7 filter wheel. My first target early in the night, this is actually from a couple months ago, is a section of Virgo from M90 to M60. Now, I mentioned before the power of the on-off button, and you'll see that here. So I've got a target loaded here. It's one that I've saved from the framing assistant. I've titled it M90 to M60 with the 6200, so I know what the field of view is going to be. These are the coordinates of the center of the frame and the desired rotation, 0. Here is a graphical map of the path of the target for the night, and this is my horizon, which I've built and loaded into Nina. There are a number of different ways to do that, but you can see, so here's the western sky because the target is coming down in the west, and my western sky is, that's my house you're looking at right there. But this tells Nina where the telescope's going to be going. Exposure info. If you run this on multiple nights, as I typically do, I've got an f6 scope. I like to get multiple nights of exposures on anything faint. It keeps track of how many exposures you've taken for each filter. So you can see I had 469 60-second lume and 50-ish 3-minute RGB frames going into the evening. That's just informational, nothing to change. Okay, now we get to triggers that, in my opinion, need to be here, not up here in the global section. First of all, restore guiding. Nina integrates with PhD2. You set up PhD2 just like you would with independently. And as we all know, PhD2 can lose a star for a variety of reasons. If that happens, it tells Nina about it, and Nina commands it to restore guiding. So if a cloud drifts across the field for 5 or 6 or 10 seconds, PhD2 loses the star. If you've looked at PhD2 when that happens, it's got that blinking bar at the top, star lost. This will automatically command it to restore guiding. So this is, I think, one of the very important triggers to have. I don't know how often it's used, but it's there and it prevents a problem. Center after drift. Any mount drifts off the center of the target. What is happening here is Nina will plate solve the image after every subframe is taken. It will compare it to these coordinates. If it gets more than half an arc minute from the center, it will send a centering command. Now, it does take a little bit of time. I probably should raise this to a higher number, but it's been working for me. All right, now, so remember where we are at this point. We have built the all-sky model, and now we're ready to go to a target. So what has to happen? I have a container, which I can use repeatedly. It's saved, and it's called Prepare Target, November 2024. What does it do? It slews and centers on the target. I notice there's no slew, center, and rotate command. I have to do the rotation manually. I do that at the start of the evening. It also means my 2 targets, or 3 targets, whatever, all have to share the same rotation all night long. That is why I have requested an electronic rotator for an upcoming holiday. I will typically run autofocus again. I figure if it's spent time waiting back up above, it's spent time building a model, I'll start fresh with autofocus, especially because early in the evening, the temperature, it tends to be falling more rapidly. It runs the autofocus. It starts guiding. One of the options with start guiding is to force calibration. When you start guiding, I do not do that routinely. I only check my calibration like every 4 to 6 months. And I'm sure if somebody thinks I'm wrong, let me know offline. But again, it's been working for me. So we're on the target. We've refocused. We're guiding. We're ready to go. I have a pushover message. So I know what time, because these are all time stamped, what time the imaging is starting. Now, remember, I'm shooting galaxies here, and I've got a show imaging container and an LRGB container. My system is to have this be a menu. Sometimes I'll do both for a target. Maybe I want to get some stars, or maybe I want to capture some HA on a target that's otherwise LRGB. But ordinarily, I toggle one of these off. Here's the on-off button. You click it, there's a little arrow here, and it's now grayed out, and there's a line through it. So when Nina reaches this point, it just skips that. So for galaxies, no show. Let's go on to LRGB. I got lots of triggers here. I have a restore guiding. This is redundant. I just have never taken it out. I autofocus every hour and 15 minutes, just as a matter of course. My scope, being an f6, is pretty forgiving on focus. I've got a critical focus zone of about 60 microns, which translates to nearly 100 steps in my focuser. So I've got a lot of latitude. I have center after drift here too. Again, I think it's redundant. And then I autofocus after a temperature change of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So whichever of these hits first, I trigger an autofocus. Now, I don't do it on an HFR change, because if the temperature hasn't changed, my scope shouldn't have changed. If it's a seeing problem, refocusing my scope is not going to help. So I don't throw it in there. Now, my loop condition is loop until a time. For my first target of the night, I am going to loop until a specific time. I will look at my chart up here. If you click on it, it shows you the time on the x-axis. And on the y, it shows you latitude. So we know that it's going to go below my house at about 45 degrees. So I want to go a few degrees before that. I figured my house is still radiating heat and it'll screw up the seeing. So, maybe I'll stop at 10 o'clock tonight. So I would go down here, change this to 2200 hours. What happens? You've already seen smart exposures. I do half luminance, half RGB. So 3-1-1-1, or in my case, since I'm doing shorter luminance exposures, I want half the time on luminance and then a sixth, a sixth, a sixth on color. So I get that with 27 60-second exposures. I'm dithering every 3 exposures here. And then 3 reds, greens, and blues each, 3-minute exposures. I use 0 gain on the camera for RGB, and I dither after every exposure. It takes about 17 seconds to complete a dither on my rig. And so this will just loop again and again. I don't have to worry about guessing how many loops can I get before 10 p.m. I just set this. Invariably, I wind up with a few less blue exposures as it loops through. So sometimes if I do multiple nights, I'll go in here. Again, the filters aren't connected, so you don't see the selections here, but I'll flip this around and do B, G, R, L and run it in reverse on the second night to try to even it out. And if I see, remember this exposure info, this is all pretty even, 54, 50, 51 exposures. Say the blue had fallen way behind and there was only 40. I might increase the number of blues for the night. Let's do 6 blues for every 3 red and 3 green or something like that. So at 2200, at 10 p.m., it will finish after the exposure ending closest to this time. It will not interrupt an exposure. Actually, what it'll do is if it knows it's going to 22 hours and 30 seconds and it gets to 9:57:31, it will see it does not have 3 minutes left, and it'll stop at that point and go on to the next command. It never goes over this limit. It will stop short. I also overlooked here, I do have a meridian flip command separately configured elsewhere in Nina. If the telescope, well, and it should, right? Well, no, here at dusk, the telescope's going to be pointing to the west all the way down. But earlier in the year, I might have started imaging here. It'll go through the flip at the appropriate time. Now, we go on to my second target, and I'm going to close up M90. I started a mosaic of M16 and 17. Again, here are the coordinates. Note the rotation says 180 degrees, obviously the same as 0 in practical terms. And it makes my rotate, because my camera inverts the image, what I think is 0 when I'm looking at the screen, the camera, Nina thinks is 180. Same information here, same command sets. Notice though, in my subsequent prepared target container, I do not run another autofocus. For all I know, I autofocused 5 minutes ago. All it has to do is slew from M90 to M16 and resume. There's no need, with my scope, to redo an autofocus. I'm not going to go through this again in great detail, and we're almost done. But the main thing I have to set every night in each of these imaging containers is how long I want each one to run. Well, this is my second one of the night. I'm going to run it till astronomical dawn. I don't know why that says -60. We'll go straight till astronomical dawn. Oh, I know why I did that. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop an hour before dawn. So I'm running show filters now, 6-minute exposures on each, dithering after every frame, one at a time. So it's just cycling through. I know that's not the most efficient. I got to work on that one day. But I save a little bit, I save an hour to run an LRGB sequence, RGB stars only, 60 seconds. I'd rather get the improved SNR of more exposures on a brighter target. So I'll run 60-second exposures with RGB instead of 3-minute exposures. I also think I retain a little better saturation on the stars than going with 3 minutes. So I'm doing 3, 3, 3 of RGB for a minute for the last hour until astronomical dawn. Okay, now it's dawn, and it tells me sequence is complete. Great time to prepare to create flats. Since I haven't done any rotation, I only need one set of flats for the night. And these are the flat commands. Well, we're going to close the flat panel cover, toggle the light on. I've already configured the light to a particular brightness, and I know exactly what exposures I need. And those are stored for each filter. Conveniently, all my LRGB are the same. 2 of my 3 shows are the same. Hydrogen's a little faster than sulfur and oxygen. So I could actually get away with fewer flats here. I could take 1 for each exposure. I don't have darks here because, like regular darks, I have done my darks, I've stored them, and I just use them repeatedly. This will click off my, here we have 140 images right before dawn. And then I toggle the light off. End of the night, just a couple more things that beyond what you saw in the original sequence. I move my focuser to 0. I warm the camera back up. I park the scope, and I have a belt and suspenders close the flat panel cover command. I disconnect all the equipment. I send a message to push over that the night is done, and I end my night summary. So that is my entire sequence without power-ups. And to set the scene for next month, this sequence works great. There's nothing, it doesn't need anything, in a sense, that power-ups offers, except that if command that you can't otherwise do. But imagine I've created 3 or 4 different sequences and I'm alternating them on different nights. And I want to make a change in the show imaging. I want, instead of 360 seconds, I want to do 600 seconds. Well, I'm going to have to open up each of the other sequences and manually change each of these numbers. Easy to do, but a little bit mindless. And in my case, as someone who bores easily, prone to failure, I skip things. What you're going to see next month in sequencer power-ups is that I can save these templates. And instead of copying them in here like this, where they have to be manually edited, the program will simply reference a master show imaging second target gain 100 JSR template. And if I make a change in that template, it automatically affects every sequence that uses the template. So it allows me to keep my templates consistent. We'll talk more about that next month, when what we're going to do is we're going to take this sequence that you've seen and we're going to compare it to the same sequence using sequencer power-ups. And then I'll also share with you a project that I'm working on to further automate and reduce the error risk of the sequence. So with that, let me ask for questions before I stop sharing.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
I have a few comments. So global triggers. I find the meridian flip makes a great global trigger because every target needs a meridian flip trigger.
Well, but the meridian flip is peculiar. The timing of it is peculiar to the target, right?
No. So if you put it as a global trigger, every target will flip at the right time for that target. I've done it. I've run it that way for many months.
Okay, cool. Good to
So
know.
yeah. And also I use the autofocus after HFR as a global trigger because I care about that for everything.
You want it autofocusing in the middle of building a model or selecting a guide star?
I don't know why autofocus matters then. You're not autofocusing then, are you?
Well, but if it's a global command,
Yeah.
and this is autofocus after HFR, so it's actually, it will only work on images because
Right.
it's looking at the last trailing 5 or 10 images. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that shouldn't be an issue.
And I also use dither as a global trigger because I want to dither on all my targets the same. However, I will say, although I love global triggers, and I've been complaining about this, I must be wrong, but there's no way to tell in the triggers list which ones can be used as globals and which ones can't. Because one of them that I want to use a lot is the center after drift, but you can't use that as a global. Why? Just because the author hasn't fixed it.
Well, just like meridian flip, it has to be Well, no, I guess it doesn't. It's just looking at the last image.
Right. So a lot of it also, I have a sheet of notes here. A lot of it depends on your mount. So, some of the dithering commands and the problem that Craig was having, he has a different kind of mount than you have. So it depend a lot of that stuff is mount and driver dependent. So like you
Right.
build an all sky model, right, using APCC. So some of those commands come with the plugin. So I have a 10 micron mount, for example, and I can build a model, but I'm too scared. I can build a model in the middle if I want to, but I just build a model and go from there. So, a lot of that is mount dependent. All speaking of auto focusing, that consumes a lot of time. So like your 20 by 300, you said it's not going to take 6,000 seconds. The one thing you didn't mention was if it has to autofocus. Now, Doug Summers has a way around that, and I can share that link if you like. But that time and that time to autofocus adds up.
Yeah, you remember from my nightly summary document, that is the number one
Oh, is it?
consumer of non-imaging time
Yeah.
on my list.
The support, as you noted, I didn't finish watching the other video yet. But the support is on Discord, and some of the authors are great, and some of them are not as great. Let's put it that way. They don't suffer fools. So do your research first before you ask a stupid question, even if you don't think it might be a stupid question. Um,
Yeah, for those who aren't aware, Nina is an open source project. The plugins, there is a core team that has created the basic program. Some of those members have written plugins because there's something that they uniquely want for their system. Like Dale Gent, who's an astrophysics mount user,
right.
writes the astrophysics tools. But they're busy, they're volunteers, and they're great. I mean, you
Yeah.
wake up on a Sunday morning at 5 a.m., you have a problem, you post a message about it with the log, and you'll get a response within an hour.
Yeah, they've been great for the most part. When you're looping through an LRGB sequence, for example, and you said you reorder it on the second night so that the B will catch up, but it picks up where you left off. So if the last image it did was the last, let's say you have LRGB set to go. If the
Yeah,
last,
it's supposed to.
yeah,
Yeah, if you stopped in the middle of it, the last one was a green, it should go to blue next.
right.
Or after two greens, it should do one more green and then go into the blues. I find it doesn't always do that.
Oh, really?
And I don't know why that resets.
You're probably looking closer than I am.
I
Um,
just look at the numbers. It's usually
yeah.
whatever the last, it's oxygen. If I do SHO, my oxygen has fewer exposures. If I
Huh.
do LRGB, my B has fewer. So,
Um, Also, you recommended Patriastro. I think he's great. He's brilliant and he really simplifies stuff. He tells you how to set up your autofocus nicely. He does a great explainer on the center after drift, what those numbers should be. So I would recommend, I mean, mine is wrong too, but I would recommend watching that and trying to understand it and putting that into force. I'm just looking at my notes. Oh, the saving the sequence. I have screwed up many sequences, on the fly, but if you don't save it, it doesn't change. So let's say I'm imaging NGC 891. So I open that sequence and I make all the changes, but then I screwed it up. I just don't save it. I open it again and it starts fresh.
right.
So that's nice. So saves you from yourself a little bit.
And the sequencer power up feature that I described at the end of the talk, the template by
Yeah,
reference, it's called, that does exactly the same thing. You can edit to your heart's content, but when you reopen it in the next night, it opens the referenced template. So unless you actually save a new reference template,
right.
it never changes. So this is each evenings is kind of a whiteboard that you can play with without ever hopelessly changing something.
Yeah, and back to autofocus, I think you mentioned that you choose the autofocus position before you start, which I do too. I just don't reset it because I'm going to set it again the next day, and my scope does change a little bit over the course of the night because the temperature changes so much here. You
Right.
know, I think unless you have a carbon fiber tube, it probably changes too much to not autofocus after the HFR changes. And do you use T 3-point polar align versus
I
sharp?
do.
Yeah, me too. The one
Yes.
nice feature about 3-point polar align is you can just pick a star and you check the box that says start here and it will start there. So you don't have to even see Polaris.
Yeah, I don't even, I pointed in the east,
Right.
uh, low enough that when it's slewed, supposedly goes 10 degrees at a time, but it seems to go about 20 degrees at a
I
time.
agree. Yeah.
You know, I don't want it to hit the pier. So I'll start, you know, maybe 50 degrees, 45, 50 degrees in the east. And it doesn't, the camera doesn't touch the tripod leg on the third point. But yeah, it works great.
Yeah. And one plugin that I will give a plug for, no pun intended, is Orbiculum because I love it. Because, let's say I want to image a target until the next target is visible, I can do that with that plugin. So I'll just run until the next target is above 43 degrees, let's say, and I can set the offset if I want to. And it uses the artificial horizon. So,
I've pulled up
well, you
the
do have it.
orbiculum commands
Yeah.
here for you just to gonna.
So the loop while next target is below altitude, if you put that one in, and it lets you choose, let's say, or is below horizon. I use the next one. So I loop until the next target is available and it uses my artificial horizon. So again, it's target dependent, but it's typically high enough to start imaging there. I don't like to image below, 30 degrees anyway. But it's not so much a problem here as it is at CAC because you have horizon to horizon pretty much there. Um, that's it for my comments. Also, I will say it's a programming language, but don't be scared. So just dive right in. Jeff's a great programmer and wow, yeah, you're shaking your head no, but you are. I've seen some of your sequences and you have to be a good programmer to write sequences like that. I'm a terrible programmer and everything works perfectly until it doesn't. And I look at it and look at it and look at it and it looks fine. And then it craps out, and the next day I go, well, of course. So that's the way programming goes. So,
But I think this is a little bit like Nina's a little like PixInsight that there's kind of you're not going to hit a wall where you say, God, Nina just can't do this, and this is important.
right.
Um, I'm sure there are things it can't do. I'll never figure them out. And PixInsight is much the same way.
Yeah, I think, or also earlier somebody asked about what programming software or what processing software to use. I love PixInsight now that I learned it, but it takes a lot the learning curve I think is very steep on it. And stuff is named badly. For example, star reduction is called morphological transformation. How would you know that? Yeah, exactly.
9 syllables.
Right. So, it's very powerful and all the stuff is in there, but you got to know what it's called. So that's it. I'll be quiet. Let others participate.
Alan, thank you. Those are a lot of great comments. And I think it underscores the point that there's no one right way
Right.
to use the advanced sequencer. What's important is you work out something that works for you. And I think some of the redundancies I have, they worked early on, and I just haven't changed them because if it ain't broke.
Agreed. Go ahead.
Ed, did you have something? You're on mute.
Work. I was just telling out at CAC last weekend that it's sad that our programs always perform the way we program them rather than the way we want them to work. You know,
Yes.
if they work the way we want them to work, it'd be a lot better rather than the way we actually tell them to work.
Well, there is a new plugin in Nina that I haven't really played with. It allows you to connect one of the AI engines to it, ChatGPT, Anthropic, Perplexity, a couple of others. This one you actually have to pay for tokens, but for $5 you get a lot of tokens. I played with it offline a little bit. It seems like it's mostly a ChatGPT version of Nina Help, which isn't particularly helpful. I hope over time it will be able to look at my sequence. You know, in theory, we should be able to say, hey, ChatGPT, here's what I want to do tonight. Create an advanced sequence for me for my rig, which you already know because I've told you about it. Then we will solve Ed's problem. Anything else? So come back next month for part 2 of our deep dive into the Nina Advanced Sequencer. And Greg, back to you.
All right. Now, next month, the meeting will be on July 20th. So as Jeff has indicated, he'll be continuing on with some more stuff on the advanced sequencer. Also want to mention that the Monsoon Challenge starts today with the official start of monsoon season. And based on what your comments were last year, we're going to run until September 30th. And this year you can pick any target you'd like, but you need to image the target between September 15th and June 15th and September 30th. And then process those images, and we'll share them at the October meeting, and they'll be published in the Desert Sky Bulletin. If you want your images published in the Desert Sky Bulletin, you need to give me express permission to use them. Some of you have given me global permission to just use any images that you post, but some of you haven't. So if you don't see your images in the bulletin, it might be because you didn't say, Greg, you can use my image. And if you want to submit images, they should be less than 10 megabytes in size, so I don't have to fool around with them and make them small enough so we can include them in the bulletin. So please feel free to submit those images. I think it's one of the strong points of the bulletin, why the bulletin won some awards last year. So, all right.
And then I will also put in my plug for tying your target to somehow the nation's 250th anniversary. The North America Nebula comes to mind, maybe the American Eagle Nebula. But there are probably some numbers that you could work with, but be creative. See if you can connect somehow the nation's sesquiquincentennial to your target. You don't have to.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, all.
All right.